Welcome to Law Next. This is Bob Ambrogi, and today we're going to be talking about AI and dispute resolution, and specifically about a conference coming up at Suffolk Law School, co-sponsored by Suffolk and the American Arbitration Association, on that very topic of arbitration and mediation in the age of AI. And here to talk about it today are three people who are both very knowledgeable in this field and will be participating in one respect or another in that conference at Suffolk. And so let me begin by having each of you introduce yourself. Tracy, let's start with you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conference on June 12th in Boston. I'm Tracy Frisch. I'm the Division Vice President of Mediation here at the AAA. And I'm most excited for the conversation around the AAA expanding into family mediation to take place.
Right. And next up is Colin Rule.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Bob, so happy to be here with you. I'm Colin Rule, CEO of Mediate.com and ODR.com, and very much looking forward to the gathering happening in Boston in mid-June.
All right. Last but not least, Kelly Turner.
Hi, thanks, Bob. Happy to be here. Kelly Turner, I'm Associate General Counsel of the AAA out of our Chicago office, and I'm actually not going to be at the Suffolk conference, but will be supporting from the back end.
Well, glad to have you here today and glad to talk about some of the research you've been doing that's relevant to what we're talking about today. I wonder if we could just kind of start by setting the stage, by talking a little bit about this conference and what to expect, what people who attend it might come away with. Colin, I don't know if you can kind of address that, because I know you're both involved with this conference, but also an adjacent conference at Harvard and a hackathon that are all tied together.
Sure. Yeah, actually, the AAA and Suffolk conference was timed to tie in perfectly to the 2026 meeting of what we call the ODR Forum, which has met all over the world over the last 25 years. So that's going to be happening at Harvard on June 11th. And then the Suffolk AAA conference is going to be happening on June 12th. And then actually on June 13th, we're having a hackathon, the VibeODR.com hackathon, where we're going to be using Claude code credits with their new legal platform to build a really cool legal application. So it's a whole series of events, but I think the crown jewel is going to be the AAA Suffolk conference. And I think Chris Gibson, professor at Suffolk, has played a key role in partnering with AAA and putting together just an incredible agenda with cutting-edge leaders thinking about how is artificial intelligence transforming the practice of mediation and arbitration. So we're going to be talking about it from many different angles, but they has worked very closely with Suffolk. And Tracy's going to be talking a little bit more about some of the fruits of that partnership. And I think we're really excited about this conference because it's going to be the unveiling of some of that great work that's been happening for even years at this point.
You know, one of the announcement of the conference said, quote, AI is no longer theoretical in dispute resolution. And Colin, just sticking with you for a second, you've been in this field a long time. You were a pioneer, a trailblazer in online dispute resolution. What does that actually mean in practice? How is there actual deployment of AI now in the profession?
There is, Bob. You know, we've been talking about this for a long, long time. You and I directly have been talking about this for many years at this point. You know, Ethan Katch, who we're going to be celebrating at the ODR Forum at Harvard, is really the father of ODR. And he's an emeritus professor from UMass Amherst. And he wrote the first book in the field, Online Dispute Resolution, in 2001 with his colleague, Janet Rifkin. And one of the ideas that he introduced in that book is this concept of the fourth party. So if you think about party one and party two are the disputants, and the third party is the arbitrator, the mediator, the ombuds, the coach, technology is a fourth party. And the interesting thing is, when they wrote that in 2001, we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have, there was artificial intelligence, but it was still pretty primitive at that point. But over the years, the fourth party has gotten more and more capable. And I think we in the online dispute resolution field saw the promise and potential of this and welcomed some of this technology into the mix, into our toolbox, what we call our DDSD toolbox, our Digital Dispute Systems Design toolbox. But I remember the first time I saw ChatGPT, my eyes almost fell out of my head. I don't think anybody, even AI researchers, had no idea it was going to be as powerful as it ended up being. And now, obviously, we've had enormous strides. Even over the last 3 to 6 months, we've seen huge leaps forward in AI. especially around agentic AI. So we're seeing a bunch of new companies cropping up, like botmediation.com and dispute.ai, dispute, and then themediator.ai, Claimbright. And many of these new companies are going to be presenting at both the ODR Forum and at the AAA Suffolk conference. So it's real. It is happening. And of course, AAA has been ahead of the curve all the way along. Our fearless leader, Bridget McCormick, a former Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court and now our CEO at AAA, has really seen this transformation occurring and has led all of us in a very visionary way fearlessly into this new AI-powered future for dispute resolution. So obviously, when AAA announced the launch of the AI arbitrator back in November, that was kind of a thunderclap across the industry. Like, this is real. This is happening. So, we got to figure out how to do this right. So I think many of us in the dispute resolution field, we're trying to wrap our heads around these tool sets and figure out how to minimize some of the potential downsides and maximize the benefits. And some of that is putting guardrails in place, which we're going to be discussing at the conference as well. But it is very clear at this point, we have gone through a one-way gate that is locked behind us, and we are never going to go back to the field the way it existed back in 2019. We better figure out because the only way through this is to go forward, and we need to work together. I like to say, same goals, new tools. We're still doing. I've got Frank Sander here on my wall. Frank didn't have ChatGPT in his dispute systems design toolbox, but the objectives that we've had in the dispute resolution field for decades, fast and fair resolution, confidential, secure, impartial, all of those objectives, the question is, how can we use these new tools to better achieve them?
Yeah, and I should mention that I'm also going to be a speaker at this conference and moderating a panel there, so I'm really looking forward to it. And also, I am actually on the AAA's roster of arbitrators. I'm on its labor and employment panel, and I have been for a number of years. And it's kind of funny because I long thought of the AAA as a somewhat staid organization, I think, when it comes to technology, going back a number of years. And Colin, as you said, there was kind of a thunderclap when the AAA announced its AI arbitrator, and really over the last 5 to 10 years, the AAA has been innovating in its use of technology in a number of ways. Tracy, I know you've been involved in a number of those innovations, and in particular, helping to launch a new family mediation ODR program. So can you kind of talk about the context of the AAA's, how the AAA is innovating in this area, and in particular, what it's doing in the family mediation area?
Sure. So something that's going to be a focus of the conference is in the summer of 2024, the AAA and Suffolk University Law School partnered for the AAA Suffolk ODR Innovation Clinic. And it's a 3-year initiative focused on creating online dispute resolution tools to assist self-represented litigants in family law cases. So really, the goal is to get into Massachusetts courts and then hopefully other jurisdictions to show that we can help self-represented litigants in no contest, low contest divorces to get through the paperwork process, which is actually quite burdensome and pretty arcane, through the use of technology, and specifically through incorporating AI into that process to help litigants, through a very difficult time, obviously, in their lives. And so I think this is a nice proof of concept to show that AI can be a tool, particularly for increasing access to justice for parties who don't have representation. And it's an area that the AAA has been very focused on in terms of looking at what can we do for self-represented parties in leveraging technology to help them access ADR and also through the courts.
And is it the focus entirely on self-represented, or is there a way of expanding this into parties who are represented by counsel but also have maybe cost issues or other concerns?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the Suffolk Clinic is focused on self-represented parties, but the obviously part of our focus is self-represented parties, but many of our cases are represented parties. And a big part, particularly with the Suffolk program and filling out the paperwork for the courts, is who wants to pay, an attorney, hourly fees to do paperwork, right? Or who wants to pay, quite frankly, a mediator hourly fees to do paperwork, right? So when it comes to you have a divorce settlement, but you still need to fill out, every jurisdiction's different. in the divorce area of what are the T's you need to cross, what are the I's you need to dot, and which way do you need to do that so this form isn't rejected. So sort of coming to a mediation settlement is obviously a big hurdle, but then sort of getting that filed into court is its own hurdle. And so that's really what the clinic is focused on.
One of the topics that will come up during the conference is that of ethics and governance issues with regard to AI. Kelly, I know that you're involved in not just thinking about this issue, but you actually done some research into kind of the state of at least AI governance issues at organizations. Can you tell us about what you've been looking into?
Sure. So we've been just internally at AAA working on AI governance for almost 2 years. I look back to kind of where we started and, took a long time trying to gather information, which was interesting because there honestly wasn't all that much out there. We were somewhat on the leading edge of AI governance and being like, we should have that. What is that? And looking to those few others that had, good AI governance programs that we felt we could mirror in some ways. And so recently the AAA did a survey of about 500 industry, senior leaders, professionals on how they are envisioning or what they are doing with AI governance. And it was really interesting as well as somewhat sobering. And we will be, or I think by the time this comes out, have just released the results of the survey. But really interesting was, one of the first questions is, does your organization have formal AI governance principles or policies in place? And that's, a resounding yes. And then the next is thinking about your organization's overall AI governance, which statement best describes its current state. And only 20 say that it works effectively, with the majority saying there's good structures, but inconsistent execution. And so that seems to be the theme throughout, that there is, good thoughts of we really need to be doing this and we're kind of trying to work on it, but maybe we don't really know what we're doing or how to make it work. There's also results that show there's somewhat siloing, so that tech is doing their thing and legal is doing their thing and maybe compliance doing their thing, but that where it works best is where they're all working collaboratively, and that's not happening probably as much as it should be. And so I think it was really enlightening to see this, and as I said, a little bit sobering that maybe these industry professionals or their organizations aren't doing better or haven't found a way to work better in terms of AI governance. But it does seem like everybody recognizes the importance of it from just an internal use standpoint, potential regulation or auditability of AI systems that they are using. So it just seems like there's more to be done in that regard. And we've been trying to, since we spent a lot of time and energy working on and thinking about AI governance. We've been, Bridget's been out talking about it a lot and trying to use our process to, help share with others to the extent they find it interesting or helpful for them to either develop their own AI governance policy or practice, or if they have one, maybe to make it more effective than what it currently is right now.
How does that spill over into dispute resolution? I mean, the question of whether or not an organization has a AI governance policy in general relates to a number of different aspects of the organization. But are there direct implications for dispute resolution?
Yeah, I think so, because if you have AI systems that aren't well governed, there's the potential for them to go awry in some manner. And even if it's just internally, that could give rise to internal disputes, maybe workplace-based, employment-based, but also if it's a system that impacts the organization's services, products externally, then, and again, something goes awry with the AI, that could also give rise to external disputes, which could be solved by mediation or arbitration. And so, our goal overall as an organization is to help others resolve for better. And so whether it's through mediation or arbitration or some other manner to be able to resolve their issues, whether they are AI based or arise from some AI system that has gone amok, or just a regular old contract. We're there to help bring to resolution.
Tracy, what are your thoughts on sort of the same question, but in the context of family mediation? Are there ethical concerns there, or even just practical concerns, given the horror stories we've all heard about hallucinations in AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think having clear guardrails in any kind of system, and now this is our, sort of newest system that we're looking at, is key. You have to make sure, right, that you're, like Kelly was talking about, there's not a black box. You have to understand how things are working to be able to know that there's not a bias in there, some kind of inherent bias, right? And that would be hugely important for any dispute resolution process. Family mediation is particularly personal, but I would think really any dispute is pretty personal to the people who are in the dispute. So I'm not sure there's a huge difference in family mediation dispute resolution than just dispute resolution writ large, with sort of the guardrails needed in place for any kind of AI system that you're going to be incorporating. But I do think the use cases, right? I mean, you could think about like the use cases for family mediation. You're looking at what's a parenting plan look like, right? Like how do we distribute assets? You might have sort of certain aspects of the dispute resolution process that you want to build, the AI agents to be able to help with. Whereas, for a contract dispute, they might be looking at some other aspect, of contract law or whatever it is. But but I also think that AI can also be used in family disputes and dispute resolution at large to assist the mediator, to assist the parties. There's sort of different aspects of the dispute resolution process that you can look at. And that's one thing I'm really looking forward to this conference, is sort of looking at what are these use cases of AI, right? It's not just like AI as mediator, right? It can be AI as mediator assistant. It can be AI as mediator trainer. It can be AI to help parties select a mediator, AI to help mediators draft agreements to mediate. There's so many different areas that you
Which
could be.
AI has applications for almost all of what you just listed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we'll be talking about those, at the conference. So I think that's what's so exciting, that there's so many different use cases for this that I'm excited to talk about.
To you and ask, again, with reference to your comment earlier that the AI arbitrator landed with the thunderclap across the industry, which it did. And for anybody who doesn't know, it's focused, at least at launch, is focused on construction disputes, and there is a human in the loop. It's not a 100% AI arbitrator. It's a platform that kind of serves up a potential award to a human arbitrator, who then reviews it and makes edits or changes or whatever else before putting it out. But the question is, what's happened since that thunderclap? Are you seeing adoption among practitioners of that tool or of similar ADR, ODR tools?
Bob, you're right. One of the things, having done a lot of online dispute resolution startups and built a lot of platforms over the years, it's never a straight line. And you can design a system in your mind's eye and say, this is how it's going to be used. And then you put it out in the marketplace, and guess what? The parties have very different feelings about how it might be useful. So I think AAA is learning a lot from the launch of the AI arbitrator. I will say we at ODR.com are learning a lot from the launch of some of our AI-powered tools. One of the things that AI can do is it can actually provide access to disputes much earlier in their life cycle. And what we're seeing is a lot more proactive use of these tools for dispute prevention and dispute diagnosis. So I don't know if we necessarily called that because I think the first use of AI, and I think the number one paranoia that most practitioners have is, am I going to be replaced by AI? And every time I do a presentation about this, that's the first question that comes up. And I actually don't think that that's the case. I think it's going to evolve practice and create new opportunities for practice. When you look about when they launched VisitCalc, all of the accountants were worried that they were going to be put out of business because a lot of what they had to do was add up numbers, and VisitCalc was a lot better at it. Well, guess what? There's more people working in accounting than ever before. And I think that the rise of these tools also are going to create opportunities for face-to-face practice. So we're going to talk through that, but I don't think that AI is going to replace us. It's going to turn us into superheroes and expand the reach and the quality of the services that we can provide our.
Tracy, Colin, I'm not sure who this question is best answered by, but I'm curious about who you think this conference is is suited for? Who should be attending this conference, and what should they expect to get out of it?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think it's anyone who's interested in AI and dispute resolution, right? So I think it's practitioners, counsel who's representing parties in arbitration and mediation, academics, trolls, right? Arbitrators, mediators, in-house counsel, where ADR is part of hopefully most, if not all, in-house counsel, ADR is part of your dispute resolution process. But really anyone who's involved in the ADR process and interested in how AI is going to come in and affect, and already has and is part of the ADR process. And I hope we also get, I know school's out, but I hope we also get some students who are sort of this next generation of ADR practitioners and are already using AI in so many different ways that they probably even have maybe the best understanding of what might come to ADR in the future.
Yeah, and if I could just add on
Yeah,
to that, I think
sure.
I think it's really important because it's still somewhat new in a lot of ways, AI and ADR, that I think it's really important for everybody who Tracy mentioned to pay attention to it and to try to be on that leading edge, figuring out what's going on, making sure that they understand it. Trust is a big thing in ADR. And so having trust in the AI is important. And the way you build trust in the AI is by seeing it and seeing what it's doing and hearing us and others talk about it. And then they can come back, whether they're outside counsel, in-house counsel, just business professionals, they can come back and feel more comfortable with that and building it in either into their internal systems for internal dispute resolution, or at least better understanding what it can do for them externally if they need to go somewhere to resolve a dispute.
Just to build on what Kelly just said, I think AI, what are the key elements of dispute resolution? I think she mentioned trust. That's an important one. I think impartiality is an important one. Confidentiality is important. AI has ramifications for all of those things. And, the truism that's circulating these days is not that AI is going to replace mediators and arbitrators, but mediators and arbitrators with AI are going to replace mediators and arbitrators without AI. So I think this is an opportunity for practitioners to get their heads around this and figure out how they can leverage it in their practice. And that's who I'd urge anyone who's interested in learning about the latest and greatest. I think coming to this conference is a great choice.
Also, I'm curious. Yesterday was another thunderclap in the legal industry, I think, with the Anthropic's announcement of a whole bunch of new legal focus add-ins for its Claude AI and integrations with a number of major legal tech vendors. And as I looked through those integrations, as I looked through those plugins, I don't see anything in there about dispute resolution. It kind of reminded me that I feel like there aren't enough people talking about the application of AI to this field. I know the AAA is obviously talking a lot about it and driving the conversation about it. But I wonder if any of you kind of agree with me that the conversation needs to be expanded. And there need to be more people talking and thinking about this.
Sure, I'll jump in. Yeah, I totally agree. And I was on a panel at Northwestern early April where I spoke, but also a bunch of judges spoke. And so, judges they're not alternative, they're regular dispute resolution. But it was really interesting because even within the courts, and these were federal judges were the ones who were on the panel with me, but also there were state court judges, and just the differential in terms of what they can use, what they can't use. Somebody was like, "Oh, I do this like on my private personal laptop, but when it's court work, I can only do this little piece of something." And so trying to, again, I think, as Colin mentioned, the understanding how the systems work and being able to understand the importance and kind of time saver and efficiencies of bringing those into ADR practices or regular court practices. From the court standpoint, also part of it seemed to be budgetary, that they didn't have the budget to do a big spend on something, despite understanding the efficiencies that they would gain. And so that's a whole different conversation. But I do think that there's a lot of fear about AI and what AI can do. And kind of as Colin mentioned, is it biased? Is it impartial? Like, we don't know, we don't understand because it's this black box. And so trying to break down the black box of it, it's not a word, is really important. And obviously we can't have people, sitting next to our developers being like, what are you doing now? What are they doing now? But creating an explainable, understandable process, I think, is really important. Our AI arbitrator, as you noted, Bob, has human in the loop, and it's not just the arbitrator. The parties are also human in the loop. So they see the AI's summaries and descriptions of what they've input into the system. And part of that is so that they can correct if they think the AI has it wrong. But also part of that is for the parties to say, oh, the AI gets it. Like, now we have more trust in the outcome is going to be, which, as you noted, is going to be the human arbitrator finalizing, revising if needed, and issuing the award. But I think more of that transparency is going to be really important to increase trust in AI, which hopefully would increase the use of AI within other ADR.
All right. Well, anything else people should know about this conference that we haven't talked about yet? Tracy, Colin, anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to get different perspectives. We have speakers who, are sort of all in, in this. We have speakers who maybe are more skeptical. So I think it will be an interesting conference to get different perspectives on the topic of how AI plays a role and, what should we be thinking about in developing AI for dispute resolution process.
Yeah, I think this was a great soupçon of all the topics that we're going to be covering at the conference. So I think probably your audience has a pretty good idea if they should be at this meeting. But I'm excited about the hackathon in particular the next day to actually have practitioners sit down with the latest tools from Claude and build things. I think there are a lot of people that have heard about it in the media, but they haven't had a chance to play with it. So that's something that I really urge people to do, is get their hands on it, because once you really experience the power of it, you kind of get the aha moment. And I hope we can have a lot of aha moments at this gather.
It's going to be a vibe coding hackathon.
Vibe coding hackathon. Yep.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks to all of you for coming on the show today and talking about this. And we will post in the along with this episode information on the conference itself and how to register and where to find out all about it. And I hope anybody listening or watching this show will consider attending, especially if you're in the Boston area. And to all of you, thanks a lot for being on the show today.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Bob.
All right. This is Bob Ambrogi. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave a comment or go ahead and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Thanks for joining us today.